Hi guys, welcome to the Improvement Season podcast. So we have three of us again on the show, and it's me, Steve Hall. Over there is Pascal Floor, and we have someone new on the show. It's Mike Challis.
Hello, another Mike.
Yeah,
so many Mikes actually.
He's not a doctor, but maybe in future, I don't know. We're going to kind of talk about Mike, why we have him on the show, who he is, his background, and why we want to introduce him to all of you guys. So I don't know if we want to kick off with just Mike, if you want to introduce kind of who you are with Revive, and then we can kind of kick into some of your background and where, what you're doing for us. And I'm sure we'll end up having a load of questions and just talking shit, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Steve. So obviously I'm a physio by profession, and I've been a physio for the past coming up to 10 years now. It's gone so fast. I still feel
easy. How old are you, Mike? Once again,
I'm 29.
You started very early, eh?
Yeah. So a lot of people kind of take gap years and things, but I went straight into it. I went straight into it. I didn't actually know, to be honest, that I was going to do it, but I knew that it was funny. I know I'm going straight into a little bit, but when I don't know if you would agree with this, Steve, or what it's like with you, Pascal, but in the school system in the UK, I tend to find that, you get caught up, you're doing your maths, you're doing your science, you're doing all your subjects, and they're trying to teach you stuff. And then all of a sudden you get to A-levels and they're like, right, what do you want to do? Do you want to go to uni or do you want a job? And you're like, I've not really thought about it. And you're kind of like, you're in this kind of no man's land then, where you have to suddenly do all this personal statements and you've got to do all this stuff to get ready to go to uni or to do something else. And you just don't really know, to be honest. So
the thing is that at least it was for me the case, and I think that this is also true for so many other people, that your true character first develops in the mid-20s up to late 20s, so between 25 to 30. This is where you are starting to become the you will stay for the rest of your life, so to speak, right? Of course, there will always be a little bit of changes here and there the older you get, but I think that this is where your personality becomes a little bit more what it will be in the future, instead of when you were earlier, you simply don't know jack shit about the world, what is truly going on in the world. You're basically still a kid, right? And I was so convinced that I know my stuff. And then I went out and I had no idea, right? And looking back in hindsight, I was just like, I had no clue at all. And expecting then that someone knows what they want to do for the rest of their life, it's just ridiculous. And I think that this is a very old system still. Because back in the days with our former generation, so our parent generation and their parent generation, it was like that. You were staying in the same company for the next 40 years or so. Nowadays, it's basically you're jumping around, switching companies like every second year if you want to actually make a career and improve. And yeah, it's just like an old system. But props to you that you actually knew what you wanted to do at the age of 19.
Well, and I totally agree with you, because they've shown in the research done on kind of brain development that actually for men, that actually the brain doesn't really stop developing until 25 years old.
Yeah, it's the frontal cortex, right?
100%.
Yeah.
So, and even then, and obviously there's that old saying by Socrates is, know thyself. And you can only really do that through exploring and discovering. And I just feel that I totally agree with you in the sense that something I'm passionate about is that I think the system is just not ideal at the moment, but there you go. And I was going to say that I really didn't know. I got to A-levels and, they're kind of telling you, you've got to do your UCAS or your university personal statement and start applying. And I was kind of talking to my mum and I said, I don't know what to do, or I'm not sure. And she said, what do you enjoy? And it was just around that time I'd started going to the gym. And I said, I enjoy exercising. I enjoy training. I was like, I'll be a personal trainer. And she was like, okay. What about something a bit more professional? And something where you could go anywhere and you could be maybe a bit more kind of recognized almost. And I was like, okay. And I was kind of like thinking about it. And she said, oh, what about physiotherapy? I mean, that's to do with exercise. And I thought, oh, okay. And I just went on a few kind of placements, a bit of work experience. And I thought, oh, actually, this is not too bad. This is pretty cool. And the absolute blessing for me was that obviously for physiotherapy, you need quite good grades. And I wasn't a terrible student. I wasn't flunking, but at the same time, I wasn't like your A-star student because I had no direction. Again, something I'm passionate about, because I had no direction at the time. I was just kind of getting by almost. But kind of as soon as I started I had that physio goal, I thought, right, I've got to start working for this now. And at the same time, I feel that kind of training gave me that hunger and that kind of almost desire to want to learn and improve. And it also gave me a bit of balance and a bit of structure in my life. And then I was quite lucky. I did better than I expected, but I got through on clearing. And then I just loved it from there, and everything kind of went from there, really. So, yeah.
So we've got Mrs. Challis as our, thank you for getting you as a physio.
Well, you could say maybe thank you, hopefully thank you. So, yeah.
I was going to say, I know, when I was going into, for me, actually, the way school phrased it didn't really feel like a choice. It kind of felt like next step is university. You're going to university. It didn't really feel like you could do all of these other things. You could go and work straight away. It was like, no, you're going to uni. So yeah, when I was there, it was just like, for me, it was, I like economics, but I couldn't really do it because I didn't have maths. And so it was like, well, what's next? Let's do some geography and business. It's like, I like that. I'm good at it. Let's do that. And yeah, I think for a lot of people, university becomes just more time to try and work out what they really want to do. And it's you only see people who are doing accountancy or lawyer things. That's oh, you know where you're going next. And even then, some of them are like, nah, I hate it, but I've got the degree.
And the thing is, in that instance, right, you have no idea what's out there. Honestly, you think that you know all of the study courses or undergrads that are out there, and all the professions that are out there, and you know what you want to do, but actually you don't, because how should you, right? There's so many occupations out there, so many things that you could do and never have actually experimented with, right? So, for example, when I was 16, I always thought I'm going to be a rock star, right? So I want to work in the music industry. And that was, of course, a little bit of a foolish thinking as well, but this was the actual me in that moment, and I was driven by that. So I went down that route, went to Berlin, and in the midst or beginnings of my 20s, I then realized what it actually means to be and work in that field, and it just wasn't for me. And then because of that, I stumbled upon other fields and other interests of mine, right? And only due to experiences and testing and playing around and also doing so many different jobs. I've done so many different things, right? I became more and more aware of what I actually like and what I'm maybe good at, what not. And because of that, I could then at the end of my 20s say okay, this is something that I do like. Maybe this is something that I want to pursue. And I have so many friends who went straight to university and actually stopped studying what they started studying at the beginning, and then went out to travel or so, or just doing a little bit of work here and there, and then started studying again, but a completely different thing, right? Mm. So how should you know what you like when you're so young? Because you have no experience to base it on.
No. And I think that can be summarized really nicely in terms of it's almost like the education system is forcing you to specialize too early. And there was this brilliant book recently come out called Range by David Epstein. I'd highly recommend people read that, because it really, and because I still think, even though more information is getting out there, that there's still this perception that, like you said, we need to know what we want to do. We need to, be a doctor, be a physio or whatever, straight away. When actually, like you said, there's so much value, and they've shown this, and he talks about it in his book, where actually the people who go on to become the most successful are those that have actually come to that, whether career or opportunity later on down their journey. And they've done different things. They've been a coffee barista in Spain. They've gone and been in a rock band. They've gone and waited on tables in Australia, or they've been in a business, and they've developed all these other skills. They've learned about themselves. They learned about the world. And they've come to their point in time later down the road, and actually that's benefited them. They talk a lot about, people like Roger Federer. He's still playing tennis, still at the top of his game. But he arrived very late on in tennis. He only decided to kind of specialize very late on. He played football, he was skiing, he was wrestling. They were doing all these things. And they've shown that the most successful people in business, people who set the most successful businesses are people in their 40s. It's not, there's this misperception that, it's all the 20-year-olds and things, but it's not. It's the 40-year-olds, So it's about going out there and discovering about yourself.
Yeah. And I mean, there are people out there who know from the get-go what they want and what their goal in life is when it comes to doing like an occupation. So for example, Katie's mom, she always knew when she was little that she wants to become a doctor. And now she is close to be 60 years old and she's still a doctor, right? So there are these people out there, but the likelihood that this is you is very, very low, right? And now for you, I think it was still a little bit of a different scenario, right? Because you got into physiotherapy and it was definitely nothing that you considered before actually giving it a try. And then it turned out to actually be the thing or profession for you that you want to pursue, like maybe for the rest of your life. Was it then something that the interest first got caught in the process? So you started to enjoy more and more the process and what it gave to you in return?
Yeah, 100% actually. It was something that, if I likened it to a relationship, it wasn't love at first sight. It was more a case of it just grew and grew and grew. And I think that I've been really fortunate in that, because actually it was all stimulated by my passion for exercise and my passion for sort of training essentially. That really gave me the base and the platform to then want to be better and to want to learn more about it. So, and like I said, I think that stimulated my learning, and then, my passion just grew and grew basically over time.
And Mike, can you take us through, obviously you've been doing it almost 10 years now. So what education have you had, and how's that progressed, and where are you now with it? And maybe also then we can talk about future. It sounds like you're not going to do what Ranger suggested and try and do all these other things. You kind of found what you want to do.
Yeah, absolutely. And so in terms of my journey, so I obviously went to secondary school, and I got my A-levels. So most, in the UK at least, they want kind of, a biology A-level, a kind of a science A-level of some sort. That's the basic foundation, really. I was quite lucky in the sense that I did biology, but I didn't do amazing at it. But I was also doing PE as well. And some universities accept that. So I did that, as well as I did economics and psychology. So I did those, and my grades were, I think, B, C, D, which, but by today's standards, that's not very good at all. But to be honest, I always say to people, I try to be quite open and honest about that, because again, sometimes people get put down about, say, clearing, or my grades aren't good, and it's like, hey, I'm not amazing, but we can all, but that's not the end. We're always getting better. It's like driving. You only learn after you pass. So if you can get your foot through the door, and it's more about those other qualities, it's about your passion for the subject, your desire and your want to be able to learn, and to continually get better and be coachable. So it's those other qualities that matter most. But so I always try to say that to people. And I got through into clearing, and I went to Keele University, which is in Stoke-on-Trent. I say Keele and people go, where? And so, but that's in the Midlands. So it's the West Midlands sort of, I was liking it to, it's like halfway between, it's in the middle between Manchester and Birmingham. But it was a great university. I was really lucky. And like I said, as I went through that degree course, I kind of, my love for learning really blossomed, I think, more generally. And, you know, I really enjoyed physiotherapy. I loved what it did. I felt that it really gave me a direction, which was really nice. You know, it felt like once I finished university, I was like, yes, I know what I'm doing, rather than finishing with a degree in philosophy. Not that that's a bad thing, but, you know, finishing with something like that and then being like, right, where do I go from here?
Mike, can I ask you a question just very quickly?
Yeah.
Because I have no idea what an undergrad or so in physiotherapy looks like. What are the modules? What are the stages you need to go through? Is it something like, for example, I did life sciences for a while, and in the beginning, the first 1 to 2 semesters, it's just the fundamental basics of physics, chemistry, mathematics, biology, and it sucks, right? But it's necessary to actually understand the entire subject later down the line. How was it in physiotherapy? Was it already kind of, I don't know, first learning just the theory and then going out there, doing a little bit of practical application and stuff?
So it will vary for certain, because sometimes universities are constantly changing the way that they do their program. And I know that in the United States that they'll probably do like, I think it's called a pre-med or something like that. So well, they'll do like almost an undergrad where they'll do like kind of chemistry or something and then go on to like physio or medicine. But in the UK, basically for physiotherapy, undergraduate degree is typically 3 years. And as you rightly said, so in the very beginning, they're really teaching you anatomy, essentially. So you're learning about the anatomy of the body, the muscles, bones, nerves, lungs, heart, how that all works. Probably more time is spent on muscles as opposed to like maybe lungs and heart, but I think they do try to vary it. And they spend, to be honest, when I was there, they spent a lot of time on that. And then
How much time, in your opinion? Now that you're also practically applying stuff, was it like unuseful things, unuseful knowledge?
Oh no, definitely not. Because I think if you talk to any like really experienced person, and it comes to any subject, if you know the basics, if the basics are done well, then everything else takes care of itself. And I reckon you could go to any experienced physio or doctor and they say, if you've got excellent anatomy knowledge, if you've got excellent biomechanical and physiology knowledge, you can pretty much figure anything out more or less. So I think that was absolutely the right way to go. I just think that, again, they try to, in a non-ideal scenario, I think it's just very crammed. And I think with the amount of other stuff that there is to learn, it's just really difficult. But no, I think they probably spot on in terms of, you know, spending a significant amount of time on that. I think it's just like a lot of things. Sometimes when you're in the moment, you don't appreciate how important it is. And then when you're like later down the line, you think, I wish I'd have paid more attention.
yeah, absolutely.
It's like, damn it. But yeah, so, but no, so kind of anatomy, and they peppered it in with other things here and there. And then you start to learn about other things. So we learned about, obviously, so I think the other thing people tend to forget is that physiotherapy is a really broad profession. It's not just a physio running on the football pitch when someone's injured. If someone has a stroke, there's physios in the hospital getting your loved ones out of bed or helping them to use their arms and use their limbs again. You've got physios on cardiorespiratory wards. So if people have got a lung condition, or if people have had a hip replacement, if people have had heart surgery, physios are the ones that are getting them out of bed and getting them moving. And I think people forget that a lot of the time. So it really is that kind of, it's a really broad profession. So yeah, coming back to what you were saying, you know, we're learning about the heart, the lungs, the nerves, the neurophysiology. And then interspersed with that, you've got what's known as clinical placements. So that's when you go out to different working environments and you you shadow, but then you get to gradually do more. You get to see patients and you get to work with patients as a student. And that's normally spread out over a number of different placements. So I did 6. Some people might do more, some people might do a bit less. Kind of varies depending on the university curriculum, really. And then there's always, like most undergraduate degrees, there's a research methods component. So you do your dissertation, and then you've got that research component to it, so that you know how to do research, and you know how to analyze research articles and studies so that you can be evidence-based. So that's one of the biggest things I think about the profession, is that we really hold ourselves as an evidence-based profession. So that's something that's really important, that you can read the literature and you can understand it. So that's something that's, I think, again, heavily emphasized, but difficult to take on board when you're a student, because it's not the most exciting of things sometimes.
Absolutely. I think that's a great segue actually into the practical application of things, because I know that we've talked at the Cliff Wilson seminar about that physiotherapy has a lot of misinformation that is being touted all the time, right? And that field is not questioned too often of the general population. And something that you have, I think that you have a very good critical thinking skill. And I would like to know, from your perspective, what are things that are just like commonly touted, which is just like totally bogus in your opinion when it comes to physiotherapy? And also, where is the misconception of people?
So I always try and like to be fairly balanced with when it comes to things. I think it's really important that we don't see things in black and white, because just because something hasn't got evidence right now, that doesn't mean that in the future there won't be evidence for it necessarily. So there are many things that are very difficult to be measured, and things that can't always be put into an experiment straight away. So I know that I don't in any, so again, kind of when you were talking, Steve, when you were talking to Brad Schoenfeld, he really highlighted how difficult it is to do research sometimes. And, for a long time, again, bros or whatever, kind of some of their methods were poo-pooed. But now some of those methods now are probably saying, oh, actually, there's some efficacy to what they do. But it's only because at the time we couldn't put that into a scientific context, because there's many barriers to research. So I think I would always put a proviso on certain things to say that don't be too quick to say that, that's rubbish, don't do that. But coming back to your point, so what are the few things? So I think the thing that's got the most amount of evidence and that backs it the most is obviously exercise and movement. So when it comes to things like back pain, any kind of, and even mental and neurological disorders, depression, exercise is probably one of the most effective things that you can do. Then kind of after that, you've got, there is some evidence for manual therapy in certain contexts, but all of those are, the thing is, I think the thing that the evidence currently supports the most is multimodal management. So it's where there's not one thing that will, that is going to solve a problem. It is the combination of things that leads to the most effective outcome. And that could, and depending on the problem and the complexity of the problem. So for example, when you've got someone who's got, say, chronic lower back pain, obviously exercise on its own probably isn't going to be, the thing that's going to cure everything. They're probably going to need a range of things. They're probably going to need a combination of, yes, exercise, but maybe they might need some psychological inputs. They might need some cognitive behavioral therapy maybe. They might need to incorporate some mindfulness and some meditation. They might need to incorporate, there might be a need for maybe some manual therapy or some soft tissue therapy. And because I think one thing, again, that's supported by the research. So some recent papers have come out, and that they've shown that what's being understood now is that pain is not a purely biological phenomenon. It is a combination of people's experiences, their beliefs, their values, their perceptions, their stress levels, their emotions, everything. So, and not only is, so for example, pain doesn't equate to damage. So you could have a problem, you could have a person, and there could be no structural problem whatsoever, no tissue damage whatsoever, but your brain is giving you pain messages. And that pain's like, that person is like, well, I'm in pain. Why am I in pain? And it's due to the complex nature of all the other factors that are involved.
I think a great example for this is something like phantom pain, or right when a limb is missing and you it's still itching, or you still feel a pain sensation in your hand, but you don't have a hand anymore, right? It's just a good example for this, that there's nothing to be painful anymore, but your brain is giving you that signal that your hand is still itching or giving you pain or so.
Precisely. And yeah, absolutely. And it's the patient's expectations and beliefs that play into that. So for example, if you, for example, Pascal, you're like, I've got this back pain, but I've had some manual therapy or some soft tissue in the past, and that's always really helped. And you come to see me and I go, manual therapy, load of rubbish. Just do this exercise and you'll be fine. Like, nah, still got pain. Sorry. But I could do that manual therapy and you could say, yeah, I feel good again. Perfect. And it's those expectations, but it's also the expectations and the values of the practitioner as well. So it was a paper by Biolowski, both recently, I think in 2011 and 2009, he really encapsulated that into a picture. And so that I think was very illuminating. But then coming back to your point as well, so emotions play a big role in pain, and just kind of our nervous system and our brain. We've got these two different nervous system types, which you might have heard of. So you've got this sympathetic nervous system response, which is your fight or flight. So when you're kind of, someone says something to you, or there's a tiger in front of you, like, I need to run away, or I need to punch him in the face. Don't do that. But then you've got this parasympathetic nervous system response, which is your rest and digest. So when you have a nice meal, when you're recovering, that's when all your systems are kind of recovering and everything. Now, what can happen is you can have a trigger in the body, and that could stimulate this sympathetic nervous system response. And that's when your system is almost like a fire alarm. You've got this fire alarm going off in the body. And that's when you can get an increased perception to pain. So again, for example, we all get muscle knots and things like that. But sometimes when we're focused on a task, or we're doing something, or we're having a fun time, no problem. But we might be stressed, we might be studying, and all of a sudden we're feeling it again. And it's that difference in kind of sympathetic versus parasympathetic response, what our consciousness is aware of. All those different factors are involved. So it's an incredibly complex and dynamic process, really. So again, which is why it's so hard to say to someone, look, this doesn't work, this does work. It's a lot of there's lots of variables to take into account. But I think just again, coming back to your point, because I'm aware that we're going on massive tangents here. But another kind of misconception is that I think sometimes ice on its own is good for swelling, when actually there's been research to show that it has no impact on swelling. Ice is good as a pain analgesic, but it doesn't necessarily have much in terms of the swelling response. It's that pain signaling which it affects. I think another thing which is kind of controversial a little bit is foam rolling and soft tissue work. So again, the current evidence suggests that foam rolling only has extremely, extremely acute effects. And again, those effects could be due to a myriad of different things. It could be a neurological response. There might be a local soft tissue response. It could be a relaxation response, but it really only lasts maybe, I think the research showed that it was maybe 5, maybe 10 minutes. But then again, I think you see a lot of people, foam rolling for like an hour before a session. And they've probably lost that benefit, after 10 minutes or so. So I think there's probably a lot of misconceptions about the effectiveness of foam rolling. So I think that's something else that is probably a big misconception in kind of the fitness and maybe physio industry as such. So those I think are the biggest two things. I think, again, coming back to soft tissue therapy, again, I think there's a lot of kind of controversy behind different types of soft tissue therapy, whether that's massage, whether that's, things like cupping, acupuncture, and so on. I think it's very context and person specific. So I'm not going to lie and say that, I will still do them, but then I operate within a performance environment where you've got athletes who've got that perception. And, if at the end of the day in a performance environment, I think things can be a little bit different. And also you can, rather than doing something on the general public and they go away and, it's seen as a long-term solution when it's not, for athletes or performance athletes, elite athletes, there is that kind of need for an acute kind of change almost, and that can be acted upon very quickly. So I think, again, it's incredibly context specific, and knowing why you're using that tool, I think that's the most important thing. If you know why you're using it and you can clinically reason and justify why you're using it in the bigger picture, then I think those are the most important things. So sorry, I'm rambling a lot.
So obviously you brought up acupuncture and cupping. So you're saying, as I don't know, from what I gather, I don't keep up to date with the physiotherapy research as well as you obviously do, and good reason for it. But with acupuncture and cupping, and I guess they've become, acupuncture's been around for ages, but cupping obviously is more recent. At least it came out as a trend fairly recently. And then you see things like, I think the Theragun, or that kind of the gun that like pounds you, which is, I guess, is similar to like foam rolling. All of these things, would you say they're potentially, for most people, like a bit gimmicky, but maybe they have psychological responses that relieve kind of symptoms, or just like acutely they might have something that would like enhance performance in the setting that you're in, where we can talk about where you are as well at the moment?
Yeah, so I think that's how I would like to put it, really. I think everything is a tool for your toolbox, and if you know why and you can reason why you're using it in an effective manner, then I think that's probably the critical thing. If you're just using it and you're thinking it's going to solve, if you're using one thing, say you're using a Theragun or whatever, and you think, right, I'm going to squat 200 kilos now and I'm going to have the biggest thighs in the world. No, you're probably wrong. But at the same time, if you've got someone who they've got a race, tomorrow, or, it's, the final championship match, and it's really important for them to play. And then after that, there's no problems. Now, again, you can get caught up in ethics and so on, and what's the right decision, but ultimately it comes down to that individual. And I think it's that patient or that person-centered approach. And if that's something that is going to allow them to be able to perform with no risk to their long-term health, and they know kind of the risks and the benefits, and they know why we're doing it, then that's a good reason for that. And again, with things like acupuncture and cupping, I think acupuncture more so, but there's more research around acupuncture. But with cupping, there isn't a lot of research at the moment because it's really hard to quantify. But again, I think if the patient knows that, this isn't a long-term fix, but it's going to facilitate other things, like, for example, if pain is a limiting factor, if you just can't move to do exercise, for example, well, what is the harm in, say, doing something like that allows you then to move, which allows you to exercise and be more physically active, which then helps you kind of get better in the long term. And again, I think if you explain that to a patient, then I think then that's the main thing. If they can understand that, then that's brilliant. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, I think so. I think, yeah, it makes good sense because I think people maybe would be confused. They're like, oh, but I see, I don't know, it might be someone like Quinn Henoch, like poo-poos these methods at certain times, or at least I think James Hoffman he'd been like cupping, like he kind of sometimes would make a joke. I think he maybe has at a seminar, but I think the way you're talking about it is like, if you're using it, you need to know why, and you need a specific reason for it. If you've got that, that's fair enough. It's when you see people, using, I don't know, they're buying a Theragun for Christmas and they're just like, this is going to be magic. It's going to solve all my problems. It's like, well, maybe it's just something that it's like nice before a session or something to give you some like an acute response, but unlikely to change the game. And so long as people are kind of honest with that, and you're not, I guess what we won't see from you, Mike, is you selling a load of like Theraguns or something on your Instagram.
No way. And again, so interestingly, I also work with the general public as well. And actually, I probably use very little of those methods because I'm not seeing them on a continuous basis, and they don't need to run a 100-meter final. They don't need to be in a football World Cup final. It's about giving them the basics, and it's about doing those other most important things, rather than those little cherry on the top type things. So I think like it's that, where you see other professionals or other people utilizing the same method over and over again, and they're not necessarily justifying why they're doing it, or they're doing it just the same thing over and over again. It's like, oh, use the gun. It's a magical tool. This will solve all your problems. And it's like, no. Do
you think that people are too trustworthy in that instance when it comes to physiotherapists promoting a certain methodology or so, that they aren't really critically thinking because it's a physiotherapist, he must be right? It's the same misconception that so many people have, that they are putting so much emphasis in the credibility of someone who has a PhD or a doctor title in front of their name.
100%. And do you know what? It's funny because they've shown that even, and probably more so, that medical experts are the most likely sometimes for bias and error, because they've got such a narrow lens, and they've almost got an overconfidence in their knowledge that they don't accept other views, and also people don't question them, like you said. So I think that actually people should be very questioning, and I'm extremely bad at this, or at least I'm trying to get better, is that, I need to be more questioning. There's that old medical model where, you go in to see your doctor and you go, yes, doctor, thank you, doctor, bye, doctor, how is the doctor? But actually we should say, oh, why are you giving me this medication? What's the point? And the thing that I love about you guys at Revive is that you'll always encourage people to question you. So, as a coach, if there's something that kind of someone doesn't understand why something is in their program, and they're saying, oh, you're always encouraging them to ask, and you're always really open to that. And I think that's fantastic. I think we all need to be really questioning everybody, because that's the only way in which, one, we highlight mistakes. I make mistakes all the time, and someone could say to me, "Oh, Mike, you've said this, but actually, da 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 da," and I'm like, "Oh, thank you. I actually didn't know that. Now we can change our approach." And likewise, I just think we need to be more questioning. That's not a bad thing at all. And at the end of the day, we're all people. It doesn't matter whether we're a doctor, a consultant, a coach, whatever. We're all liable to error. And so we just need to be confident and happy that we're just, respectfully asking a question. And if they if they get upset or if they go, bleh, then obviously they're not the person for you. And you can go, cool, that's fine. But, that's their problem.
Absolutely.
No one's above, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead, Steve.
Just like no one's above the law, no one's above the evidence.
Absolutely.
No. And also just like on that point, I think sometimes we can get a little bit too caught up in the evidence. So when we talk about evidence base, it incorporates 3 components, and that is one, the research, but that's also experience, the person's experience, or whether that's the coach, the physio, or the doctor. It's the experience, and then the sort of the expectations and the expectations of the patient. And it's those 3 kind of trifecta that makes up evidence-based. So I think sometimes we can get a bit too caught up in the kind of the scientific approach, when actually there is still value to, and we should have that balance between, between, okay, what does the evidence say? What does the research say? But then actually, what's my experience? Because again, your experience as a coach might fly in the face of something in the literature, but that still has value. And equally, a patient, whether that's a client or a patient or an athlete, if they're saying to you something like, this exercise really doesn't fit for me, you're not going to say, well, the research says that you're wrong. That's not very good. So it's that, I think we always need to be, again, a bit more kind of critically thinking in the way that we approach things. So.
Absolutely. So let's just switch topics a little bit and go for a little bit more of practical application of what the audience can actually do for themselves. So let's just say you have a little bit of an injury here and there, or a little bit of a discomfort somewhere after training, or it just pops up. What is it actually that you can do then, or should do, in your opinion?
I think there's a lot of places that you could go with it. I think, firstly, whether you've had a similar thing in the past. I think things like, noticing certain things. So, for example, if whatever it is, the degree of pain that you might be in, other factors such as, have you got a swelling response? Is there redness? Is there an obvious thing wrong? Like, is my arm facing in the wrong direction? Maybe, like some obvious things, but like maybe some things like that might indicate to you, okay, this is a little bit more of a problem. I need to probably go and see someone for a second opinion, or at least some advice on what I need to do. So that would be my first thing. I think depending on your knowledge and your background, if you're someone who perhaps doesn't have a good background knowledge in either, injury, medical anatomy, fitness, or whatever, then it's probably best that you go and see someone, so that you can get that more kind of knowledgeable opinion. But if you're someone like, again, it's just yourself, Pascal, you know a lot about yourself. You've got you've got family members who are in the medical profession, so you've got that background knowledge. So you might actually know, it's probably more related to this. I know how to manage it. I know the factors that I need to put in place to get back on the right road, so that I can do that. So I think it first depends on where that person is at, how much background knowledge they have about problems and themselves, depending on where they need to go. But then, so that would be my first kind of piece of advice, because that then really dictates what you need to do. So I think, again, having a coach or seeing someone else is really valuable, because then that they can actually say to them, Mike, you need to go and see a physio, or Mike, okay, what we're going to do, Mike, is you've got this problem. We're going to just modify your training now in order to adjust for this problem. And then when that problem starts to improve, we'll gradually progress. So does that answer that part of that question?
Yeah, absolutely. And what do you then say, like, because I know that the medical system is quite different in the UK and in Germany and the US. And when it then comes to a financial component, I know why people are then afraid sometimes to go down that road and try to look up some information on the internet, right? Is there then So I've done some consultations in the past with Quinn Hannock. That was before I was aware of you. So now Mike is a
massive respect to Quinn.
Yeah, now is a physio. Mike is a physiotherapist over at Revive. So if you want to book a consultation, you can go over to Revive Stronger and actually do that. And now you can actually get an online assessment of the problem. But when it comes to trying to actually find the solution and also problem yourself, do you think that this is a valid method, or is that just like a lost battle?
I think, to be honest, I think that is a bit of, it's not the ideal situation. I think people are always very reluctant to part with their money for, to see a physio, to see someone else, and, for valid reasons, because again, just like any profession, any industry, which is something that why I'm so passionate about trying to be the best that I can be, is that you get quite a lot of people who just, aren't great. You get terrible physios out there, you get terrible chiropractors, and you get terrible personal trainers. But then you've got really good ones. And it's just such a shame that, unfortunately, that sometimes, a profession will be stereotyped because of those unfortunate cases. And so I think people are afraid to invest their money. But at the end of the day, you've got to sometimes, say it's 40, 50 quid. People have no problems buying a pair of shoes for like 130 quid. Yet they'll say, oh no, can't afford physio, or can't afford, this. And it's like, really? Or, they'll spend, X amount on coffees every week or whatever. And it's like, so I think there's that component. And at the end of the day, how much do you value doing what you do, training? So, if you love to train and your injury is preventing you from training the way you want to train, why don't you go and see someone about it? Because then you're going to be back training soon and you're going to be making more gains. So, it just kind of makes sense to me. And also the other thing from a more technical standpoint is that they've shown in the literature that when you have an injury or when you have pain, your body might change the way that it moves to compensate for that injury or that problem. And even when that problem has resolved, those movement strategies stay the same. They don't go back to normal. And so actually the sooner that you solve the problem, the better off that you're going to be. Whereas if you just leave it, and then I've had this in the past where, people have had a problem and it's like, I thought it'd go away, but I left it. And they come and see months down the line when actually it would have been an easily solvable problem if they'd have just come and see you straight away.
Yeah. People in the fitness industry seem to love like car analogies. So basically it is like you are not a professional in fixing your car, but you think that you have the skills and you're trying it to do on your own. It masks the problem, but you never actually fix the issue. And then the car is just further breaking down instead of actually taking in the money or take the money, go to a professional, get it fixed for like $300 or so. And then you save up so much more time and also money in the long term than actually trying to fix it by yourself and then make matters worse.
Precisely. It's like kind of, if your exhaust is kind of like falling off and you think, I won't go to it's going to cost me money
duct
to
tape.
go to
duct tape fixes everything.
Duct tape, perfect, fixes everything. Yeah. But then, so you carry on driving or whatever, and then all of a sudden you've got a bigger problem on your hands. So rather than it being like 100 quid to sort out, it's now like £500 to sort out. It's exactly the same situation. And like I said, if you don't have a good awareness or a knowledge about yourself or about injuries, then why kind of, I think, waste your time effectively.
So I dealt with a couple of things in the past, especially recovering from a hip surgery as well. And I've seen so many physiotherapists over the years. And now, so in Germany, it is quite a privilege because you can get up to 18 sessions from your insurance. right? And you only have to pay like $20 for 6 sessions. It is crazy.
That's awesome.
I am now, though, at a physiotherapy or physiotherapist who then charges an additional $20 per session. But it was absolutely worth the investment. And for me, it is kind of, I don't even have to spend that money to get physiotherapy sessions, but I was willing to do that to pay on top of it. Like, it is basically over $100 more than you would normally pay for 6 sessions here in Germany. But it was absolutely worth it because he was actually able to help me, and I had the feeling that I was in good hands. So yeah, I mean, you can walk around, you can try to find someone who is qualified enough to help you. It's like you said, many people aren't. I think that this is also just the typical thing of falling as well and being taught like common misconceptions. For example, your education is sometimes, or your knowledge is sometimes just as good as your education was, right? If you had a shitty professor, for example, and he taught you so much bullshit, then you believe it to be true as well because of confirmation bias as well, right? And when you're then in that instance, I think that because physiotherapy is also a little bit of a complex field, there's so much we still don't know about the body and the way it works and how to actually go about pain management and treatments in that area, that there is so much bad treatment out there. So you have the chance of actually going out there trying to find someone who is appropriate for the job, or actually just invest a little bit of money and maybe be on the safe side of things.
There's a saying, which is something like, pay cheap, pay twice.
Yeah.
And how many times have it where like, I'll just, I'll buy that thing, but I'll pay, I'll buy the cheap stuff. And then, it breaks or it wears out, after like a week or so, and you're like, and then you've got to pay for another one. You're like, I might as well have just bought the more expensive pair, but that's going to last me, a decent amount of time.
As I get older, I see that phrase becoming more and more true, and I'm like, oh, now I can actually probably afford the better thing most of the time. I'm just so ingrained to buy cheap. But to your point there, I personally I've had consultation with Quinn Hennock, but before that I saw an in-person physio, because you always think, oh, see, an in-person physio is probably better, and I think you probably say that's also the case. But in this instance, it was someone local to me. I didn't know anything about them. I couldn't actually do it. Like, it's actually quite difficult to do research about physios. Like, I don't know if there's like not review centers or anything. No one referred me. I had a couple of sessions with him. It was pretty damn expensive, and really it didn't make a difference. And then I had a consultation online with Quinn, and that's where I got the results. And I think that's why we're super passionate about having you on board, because for our clients, we don't want them to go through the situation where they're like leaving an injury because they don't trust any physios around them, or they just pay a physio around them and they actually can't help them at how they want them to. So that's why we're really passionate about having you on the team, because we trust that you can actually give a great service to people. And that's invaluable for people like us who want to just train hard and don't want to be held back by that and don't want kind of injuries to get in the way.
And I think that this is a massive problem, Steve, that you're bringing up, because I have my fair share with testing and giving physios a try as well. I became so skeptical about that field, up to a point where it's not good anymore, the skepticism, where it's even just like probably my personal bias that is so negatively impacted by that, or my past experience that is now impacting the way I look at physiotherapy, right? I know that there are competent people out there, such as Mike, such as Quinn, right? I've experienced that myself as well, but because of my past experience and the majority of people not giving me good treatment, the best example was when I had like when my rib cage, or when I had 2 ribs that were broken, that they prescribed manual therapy, and that they massaged my broken rib, and it was freaking painful, all right? And something like that just makes me skeptical. But I'm always trying to be open-minded and be like, okay, this is just one case. That doesn't apply to every physiotherapist that is out there. The same applies to something like personal trainers. I take a lot of pride in what we are doing. And if then someone had a bad experience with a personal trainer or a couple of personal trainers and is now like every personal trainer is like that, or because the entry level to personal training is so low and that there are so many uneducated personal trainers out there, I sometimes even feel embarrassed to say that I'm a personal trainer myself.
And I think that's why when I initially I was really sort of shy / kind of reluctant to say, I'm a physio, because I thought, oh no, they're going to think, oh, another physio. But coming back to your point, Steve, I think one of the biggest things that I feel makes a difference is whether it's a physio or someone else, is their knowledge and their passion about a sport. So, for example, Quinn, he's a really high level Olympic weightlifter, and he's absolutely immersed in that kind of weightlifting, powerlifting kind of environment. And so he's got a massive amount of knowledge on the sport in and of itself, regardless of his, physiotherapy knowledge. And I think that's what makes one of the biggest differences. And I would like to think that because my passion and some of my knowledge about sort of training really complements my physiotherapy knowledge, and I think that's where the real gems lie. Because sometimes you can go up to an athlete and you'll be on the pitch and someone will do something and they're like, yeah, grade 1 ankle sprain, and you're like, how do you do that? And it's just because they know the sport so well, and they've done it themselves before, that they're that good. And sometimes they've been around, physios or other people that long that they know. And so having that context and sport specific knowledge is so crucial. And also passion is contagious. If you've got someone who, we love bodybuilding, and if you come to me and I'm passionate about bodybuilding, then immediately we've got a connection, and immediately I know how I can help you modify your training, and I've got that additional kind of knowledge and experience, which is only going to complement my the physiotherapy side of things. And I think that's what really helps, and what I feel might have helped Quinn help you so much as well, Steve.
Maybe on that point, maybe this can be the finisher, although maybe this should have come earlier in the podcast, but it's fine. Well, maybe not. But outside physiotherapy, what do you train for? What's your background been? As you said, this is really important, and it's part of the reason, obviously, you're on the team for us, because it's super specific for us. But I won't spill the beans. I'll let you talk about kind of your own kind of training history and accolades.
I'll spill the beans. So basically, very similar to what Harry mentioned in a previous podcast, I think I initially started weight training just out of kind of a place of a bit of insecurity. I was never someone who kind of played rugby or played a lot of sports, just because I didn't have the confidence. But then I started weight training and I started seeing a difference, and it really gave me confidence, and I just fell in love with bodybuilding essentially. And bodybuilding was just what I loved. It just, it really sounds a bit cheesy, but it's kind of like, every day I was like, yeah, I get to train. I love it, almost to the point where I was probably like, you need to kind of have a bit of a life as well. I'm absolutely passionate about bodybuilding, but I actually competed in a natural bodybuilding competition back in 2014, which to me feels like, it was only 2014, and it's actually like that was a long time ago now.
Yeah, the level of competition is also quite different to now.
Crazy scary.
Was it still in 2014? It was UKDFBA, wasn't it, or BNBF?
It was BNBF.
Yeah. So was it already 2014 at the BNBF with the Strider glutes and Christmas tree and stuff like that? Yeah.
I think it was. Yeah, it was.
It was also your first year, Steve, wasn't it?
It was, yeah.
Yeah.
The glutes were a bit newer, but some people were getting there. It was I think it was a bit more of like, oh, you've got that, because I had them from the side, which I can get quite easily, to be honest. So that was a bit of it's just something I'm lucky with. But yeah, so it wasn't like a guarantee. Because I competed against Ben Howard, who is like the striated king for the glutes, but he didn't have them really back then at all. So yeah, it was kind of, not many people had it, but some did.
I think I can remember when I was competing that there was probably maybe 1 or 2 people that had striated glutes, and you were like, yeah, they're shredded. They're going to win, kind of thing.
Crazy how the niveau has changed over the years now.
I know, but it's great because, you know,
Absolutely.
a rising tide raises all boats, or something like that. But yeah, so, you know, I competed in 2014 and I really enjoyed it. I really, really enjoyed it. But just not through kind of just segueing a little bit, really, that I was training at a gym and I really got into powerlifting, and I really just started to enjoy powerlifting a bit more. You know, it was a powerlifting orientated gym, and I really enjoyed it. And so that formed probably the basis of my training. But to be honest, in the back of my brain, I always had that aesthetic kind of focus. I was always, you know, had aesthetics in the front of my mind. But I competed in a powerlifting competition, which I think was in 2017, which was great. And I absolutely loved that. So it was great. And then it wasn't a formal competition, but it was just kind of more for a bit of fun. I did a very local strongman competition as well, which again, I really, really enjoyed. And then it was kind of after that, which I don't know what it was really. I was just in a bit of a transition phase, and it was kind of the summer of 2018. And I just kind of was really like, I don't know what it was, but something happened. And I was just like, do you know what? I'm going to focus on bodybuilding. You know, it's what I love to do. I'm not going to beat about the bush. My attention and my focus is going to go on this now. And then around that time, I got a job at Loughborough University as a physiotherapist. And at the same time, so I was starting to train. And at that point in time, I'd just finished a very suboptimal cut phase. Extraordinary, you know, I was quite lean. But then, so I was getting back into the swing of things, and I just discovered on YouTube this podcast called Revive Stronger, because it was with Mike Israetel, and I'd always followed Mike Israetel. I'd followed him with Chad Wesley Smith, and I always really loved his approach, because I just loved the fact that he was very evidence-based. He followed kind of my thinking with my physiotherapy background, and the thing that I loved, and I just became absolutely immersed in the Revive Stronger podcast, because I just loved the approach. I loved the balanced approach and the openness to learn and the great guests. And I was like devouring podcasts, like constantly listening while I was training. So I was just like, I was constantly like listening to it. And kind of just as things went down the line, I was using a lot of the Renaissance periodization kind of work as well to help with training. But I was really kind of thinking about myself and kind of how I want to develop myself. And people always talk about, you know, not only, you know, about following your passion and about doing what you love. And like, I love physiotherapy, but I was like, how can I combine my passion for training and my passion for bodybuilding and physio? And, you know, I was thinking about, you know, maybe I could talk to some powerlifting clubs and things like that and try to get involved. And that wasn't really sort of kind of flowering too much. And then kind of all of a sudden I just thought, and, you know, when I was seeing people like Quinn and you talking to Quinn, I was just thinking, I wonder if I could somehow do that. And then it was just then really where I thought, you know, I'd love to get involved with something like Revive Stronger. And, you know, we obviously had we had the seminar with Cliff Wilson, and I just thought this could be a perfect opportunity where I could just, you know, might not happen straight away, but, you know, at least if I can just, you know, be myself and try to help out, then hopefully my skill base might be valuable, because as far as I was aware, there wasn't another service like Quinn that was offered anywhere else. Quinn was the only person who offered a physiotherapy type service at all. And I thought, well, it'd be great to be another person who's passionate about bodybuilding specifically, but then can also help, powerlifters, can also help other, strongman weightlifters and the like, and can help them from there. And, and everything's blossomed from there, really. So it's been great.
And what I will say is, when you said, just to bring you up on like how lean you got, I would say Mike was probably about 5 pounds from legit stage, shredded glutes, everything. And I'm very excited for your future, not only as part of Revive Stronger and as a physio, but also in bodybuilding, because if you check out Mike's, not that he has put them out particularly, but I've seen Mike's physique, and he is a great structure for, especially like he will do very well in the lightweight class. So he will challenge Z for sure.
When is the next time that you're planning on competing?
Do you know what? At the moment, I'm not entirely sure, because I think right now my main focus is to put on as much muscles as I can. And I think that's got to be the main priority. And I'm aware that, I'm 29, but if I can capitalize on at least a couple of years of really good, solid training whilst I'm still youngish, and not super young anymore, but, while I'm still youngish, then I think that'll really go in my favor. And that hopefully as I'm, when I get to kind of those, later, mid 30s, that'll be then a great platform to then compete a lot more. But yeah, so kind of it's a wait and see. There's not a definite date in mind, and it's certainly tempting, when you've got guys like yourselves competing. But
August 2020.
Yeah. But no, long term, we've got the long term plan in mind. So we're on the muscle gain train right now. So for a successful, dominance to come.
Sounds good.
And I want to meet Z. Well, I've heard a lot about Z, so I'd love to meet him.
Yeah, he's coming over. He's coming over to the UK, and he's not going to stay there only once, in my opinion. I mean, he has to do the work to actually be shredded enough, but we are aiming for worlds, and this is me saying that. He has to put in the work, right? I will support him as best as I can, and I think from a muscular perspective, there's no doubt that he has it in him to actually go there. Now it's just a matter of actually getting him lean enough. And also, of course, what the judges think of him in regards to what he brings to stage and how it looks like and all that kind of stuff.
I think like something that I reflect on a lot, but also thought about this morning, was that we are only ever competing against ourselves. I think sometimes when I've talked to people, a lot of people sometimes get put off bodybuilding because of the subjective nature. Yeah. Obviously, you've got judges, and it's based on opinion. It's not like, oh, squat down, squat up kind of thing. It's quite subjective, and I think sometimes people might sometimes get put off by that. But at the end of the day, it's a journey, and we talk about all the time how people like Jeff Alberts and people like that, because of the level of competition now, people like that are might not place. But at the end of the day, it's not about, we could have all the first place trophies in the world, but that might not mean much. But if we can say, and again, this was highlighted in the Cliff Wilson seminar, it's the journey that we go on. And if we're making progress, if we can say, oh no, in that 2014 competition, I look like that. I look like a kind of a soggy cabbage, but actually 2022, I look the real fucking deal. That's where we take the meaning from. And it's that progress. It's always competing with ourselves. And I think that's where the gold really lies, and why I think bodybuilding's so nice, really.
Yeah. And this is where I'm coming from with my season now this time as well. It's a challenge against myself, and I don't care about the placing, to be honest. I want to make it to stage in the best condition possible, where I look at myself and be satisfied with the way I look. And if I do so, right, then placing well is basically just a nice byproduct, but it's not the end all be all, right? I'm not putting too much emphasis or stock into that, and that is then kind of dictating the way I feel about my season, because I see it all the time that people are going into the season with a certain expectation of, this is where I want to place, even though that they look great and that they've done everything they possibly could, they are unsatisfied with the results, where it's like, rather turn it around, right? But rather make it just a journey for yourself. And when you're then ticking off the boxes and you look great and you place well, then that's a nice byproduct, but it's not, once again, the end all be all if you're not getting there.
And on that note, just like you said, if you've done the best that you can do, that's amazing.
Yeah.
Like, you've got nothing else to give. That is the most important thing. Like, if you've given your absolute best, then that's 100% the best thing, and you can go to bed at night and you can sleep with a smile on your face.
And just think about it, right? What is more satisfying for you, and what makes you happier? Is it to get a trophy but knowing that you didn't bring your best, or looking the very best and knowing that you made or took advantage of that season like completely? If then on top of that there's a trophy, perfect. This is a kind of a symbol for your accomplishment. But what makes you happy when you have to choose between those two, right? And I think that it's not the trophy. When you're not convinced that you really deserved that trophy, what is the trophy then worth?
Exactly.
Nothing really, right?
Nothing. Yeah. And my it's quite funny because my stepdad is a bricklayer, and he's like no nonsense, and he always keeps me grounded. And he goes so I'll come back and I'll go, oh, I came I came fourth or whatever, or I came first, and it's like, out of how many? And it's like, I came first out of three.
Yeah.
And it's like, yeah, you could say, yeah, I came first in my division, or equally you could come 10th, but out of like 100 competitors. So again, it's very context specific, and it's not about the trophies. It's just about, one, have you enjoyed the process? Who have you become? Have you enjoyed it? And have you done your best? And there you go.
Yeah, absolutely.
Fantastic. So I think we've been chatting for a long time. We should probably call it here. I think we could probably keep chatting. It's all good. So hopefully
just getting Mike on another time.
I'd love to.
So yeah, we'll have to get Mike back on, and I think doing a Q&A would be really cool. I think I often get questions through Instagram that are like very physiotherapy specific, and I'm just like, it's not in my scope of practice to answer this. So it'd be fantastic to have Mike back on, do some of that. And yeah, like Pascal said, if you do have an injury at the moment and you're kind of stuck, maybe you can reach out and book a consultation with Mike. But I think people will have enjoyed and got a lot of takeaways from this podcast regardless.
I hope so. And yeah, just as you said, Steve, if anybody, I'm extremely open, I'm extremely approachable. I'm trying to be a lot better on social media in terms of Facebook and Instagram, still working on that. But, I'd love if people want to ask me any questions about problems, then please feel free to reach out. I'm always here. And I'm just here with Revive, really passionate about moving Revive stronger forwards and the bodybuilding performance and industry. So here let's go.